Hello and welcome back to the game room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. And it seems like a lot of people these days who cover games seem to hate them. Or at least the people who play them. Well, that's not me, and that's not the 1,830 of you beautiful people checking out this video here today. Well, we are here, we are in the middle of November, Thanksgiving is coming up, and I've been playing me some Super Mario Wonder, which actually is surprisingly better than I thought it would be. And I'll probably get into that deeper either in my year-end review or whatnot as far as different games released this year. But that's not why you're here today. Why you're here today is it got me thinking about some more NES games. Specifically, NES games that we never got that came out in Japan. So if that sounds interesting to you, let's check it out. There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my game room.
Now, some of these games I have spoken of before, so we're going to go through those a little quickly, but I do have a lot of ones I have not spoken of, one of which is a game that is surprisingly good, and that is Moon Crystal. So this is a very impressive visually game for the NES. It sort of plays out like a Prince of Persia. It's an action platformer, but your character moves a little wonky. You can grab onto ledges, and then there's a jump mechanic where you can do a double jump in midair that is kind of similar to Shinobi, but even more finicky. It leads to a lot of deaths. It has unlimited continues, thankfully, but really just, it's a very cool game. It has cutscenes, a la Ninja Gaiden. There's a very, I think there's like 6 stages. I don't know if it's based on a movie or an anime or something of that nature. I don't know why we didn't get it too, because it's a very fun game. It's got great pacing and surprisingly difficult, but difficulty you can overcome. So definitely for someone who's looking for a good game on the NES that you may not know anything about, Moon Crystal is a phenomenal game. Check it out. Well worth checking out. Now, with the new Godzilla -1 coming out this December, it got me thinking about some monster games a few months ago. And one of the ones that is Famicom only is King Kong 2 by Konami. Now, people might be wondering, why is it King Kong 2? Well, there was a movie in the 80s called King Kong Lives, starring Linda Hamilton, that I actually really liked. Over the years, I've heard people say that is a terrible movie, but I enjoyed it. And apparently in Japan, it was called King Kong 2. So that's why when they made an NES game, they called it King Kong 2. And this is a very fun game, actually. It's a kind of a top-down action game, almost like a Jackal or an Ikari Warriors, but there's different types of play styles in it. You play as King Kong, which, wow, what a revelation, playing a game on the NES where you play as the monster instead of someone trying to take on the monster. Although in Godzilla you do that too, but it's just not a very good game. But yeah, King Kong 2 never came out, and then there is another King Kong 2 that's on the MSX only, but we're specifically talking about this game, which if you want to pick it up, it's pretty damn cheap. I think I got this for $11, so well worth picking up. Now here's one that's just kind of for kind of cool to know about, because as I've looked more and more into these Famicom games, you'll find out there's a surprisingly large amount of them, because there was less regulations in Japan, of carts that have extra chips in them that give the games extra capabilities. And one of those is Contra. So yes, of course, we got Contra, but the Famicom version of Contra has cutscenes, has dialogue, has a world map, kind of like Ghosts and Goblins between the stages, and it's just very cool to find out about it. I put it a ROM in maybe 3-4 years ago and actually experienced it for myself, and it really helps flesh out the two main guys, Lance and whatever the other guy's name is. And it's one of those things where it's not, whatever, we still got the game, but it is funny to think that all this stuff was playing on an NES cart in Japan, and why didn't we get it? And then just for a sidestep, there's also the European version of this called Probotector, which replaces all of the humans with robots, which I first learned of them doing something like this in Germany with Turok the Dinosaur Hunter. And so when I later found out about Probotector, it didn't surprise me. So I was like, oh, I guess that's just a thing they do in Europe. And I don't even think it's all of Europe. I think it's mainly certain spaces, but because Germany had it that way, then the rest of Europe got it as Probotector. I don't know. But that's just a cool little tidbit here for you if you want some useless NES knowledge. Now, here's one that I really enjoyed. I covered it on the channel, 6 years ago now, back when they were re-releasing it as Fire Emblem Fates Echoes, and that is Fire Emblem Gaiden. And it's funny enough, I preferred the NES version of this to the remake, just because the remake really added a lot of stuff to it that changed it from this is the second Fire Emblem, if you guys don't know. And what's cool about this is that this sort of introduced a Mario 3 type world map between stages. It changed the way that you could upgrade your characters, and it had just everything's a little bit different in this game, kind of going in line with sequels being different on the NES. And the music's really cool too, and it's the first one that introduced a split story where you play as Alma, and then you play as Ellie or Celeste or Cerise. I can't remember the girl's name, but very solid game, very enjoyable. I gotta give Fates Echoes a chance. Part of it's because it's on the 3DS. I've said it before, I can only play so many games on a handheld before I get checked out. And that was definitely an example of it. But Fire Emblem Gaiden, if you want to check it out, you can pick up Fire Emblem Fates. Or not Fates. Is it Fire? No, it says Fire Emblem Echoes. Why am I saying Fates Echoes? Fire Emblem Echoes on the 3DS. And yes, I have a NES ROM of it too, and this is the one I reviewed that unfortunately didn't keep its save file, which once again goes with me not covering as many of these. Now another one. So a lot of people know about Final Fantasy on the NES, and they know about the Final Fantasy V that we didn't get on the SNES, but of course, what happened to 2 and what happened to 3? Now, I don't have a copy of 3, but I did get a copy of 2, which allegedly is the worst game in the series. This kind of goes in line with Squaresoft's thinking with the Secret of Mana magic system, where the mages and the magic users and your characters in general have to use their ability in order for it to improve. So there's no way of, at least I think that's this game. I sometimes confuse this with Fire Emblem Gaiden, but I think that's how this works. So you really have to use your abilities in order for it to earn you anything. And that leads to a lot of stress because sometimes, like, how do you level up somebody if you're not in the optimum way to doing it? You gotta just keep using your spells, and at a certain point, I think the mages get overpowered. Kind of similar to in Fire Emblem, Fire Emblem Gaiden. I think has a similar thing with the range people. But yes, Final Fantasy 2, another game we never got. Final Fantasy 3, I wish I had a way of playing or a copy of it. I can play it on the Pixel remasters that just came out, but that's another one. And that's what's nice is these have been re-released as the Pixel remasters. And I think on the PlayStation, you could play Final Fantasy 2 on the Origins collection, if I recall. But 3 for a long time was the one you couldn't play. And 3 is the one that introduces the class system that was made so much cooler in Final Fantasy 5 and Final Fantasy Tactics. So 3 is one I would definitely like to go back and check out. Though I still haven't played the first one. I literally have not played Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. I played everything 6 and beyond, so that would be something fun to do someday if I can ever get around to it. Alright, we're just going to talk about this one very briefly because I mentioned it in my Halloween's episode. So, another game we did not get, which is the progenitor to Resident Evil, according to a lot of people, is Sweet Home, which is a very fun game that is a turn-based RPG that takes place in a mansion where you have 5 characters. If one of those dies, they can die permanently. You could split your team up into different amounts of team. You could have them go by themselves, which is stupid. Generally, you want to keep 2 as together, 3 together, or keep them all together for the most part. But it's a really fun, interesting game and kind of a hybrid of Maniac Mansion with a turn-based game. And I really, really enjoyed playing it when I played it for Halloween maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Alright, here's a fun one. So I have covered this one on the channel too, back when I was having Reaper do his reviews. And since I had him cover cat games, it only makes sense that he would cover Samurai Pizza Cats, which was a cartoon that I don't remember, but I do believe it existed. And it's kind of a forgettable game, but it's fun. It's like a fun platformer. You play as the different cats. I think each stage, I don't think you choose the cat. I think it's just randomly assigned to you. Definitely a cartoon that was trying to play off the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles hype, but fun in its own right. And I don't really remember much about it, but I do remember it being decently fun. So one that would well worth checking out. As far as a pick up and play dumb fun NES game, this one is definitely it. And it's a shame that we never got it. So I don't have this one either, but one that is really funny is a game called Diver Eon Man. So this was a game that I was supposed to get when I bought a large collection of games, or a large purchase from a company called Reproductions.com that never sent me the order and took my money and just screwed me over. And that was one of the games I was supposed to get. And the funny thing about this game is it got a 4-page spread in Nintendo Power. I want to say the February issue of 93, issue 45, I think. It had a 4-page spread in it, and then it had a review in it. And this is why it was so crazy back in the 90s as far as when games would come out or what was available, because Nintendo Power would review something and then would come out 2-3 months later, a year later, or not at all. And so if this was a game that looked interesting and you put it on your Christmas list, or for me it would be my birthday list because my birthday's in March, never would have heard of it. And then eventually it's just like, what the hell happened? And this, it looks like it started out as a sequel to Wrath of the Black Mantra, I think. But it started off as a sequel to that, and then kind of morphed into its own thing where you're time traveling. It just looks like a competent action platformer. So something I'd love to give it a shot. Someday, at the time I really wanted to cover it for the channel, but never got it. And so at this point, since I kind of cooled off the reproductions, it's either going to be playing it on a ROM or trying to pick up the Famicom version of the game. And in that same order, I was supposed to get the Splatter House, something, whatever the hell the chibi-looking Splatter House on the NES was. That was going to get that game and Sweet Home. And luckily, one of the reviewers of my channel sent me a copy of Sweet Home that he made, so I was able to cover that. But yeah, I was supposed to get the Splatter House game, which is just instead of it being the over-the-top violent game, it's more of a cutesy. It's still a beat 'em up, and it is several, a few levels. Not something you hear terribly a lot about, but it is known as an underrated game. And I think it might have even been available on the Virtual Console at some point, but maybe just in Japan. But that was another one we never got that I really wanted to check out. It's funny. It's part of the Splatter House series, but no one ever talks about it. It wasn't even included when they did the Splatter House remake back in 2010. All right, back to the games I do have a copy of. So one of the games that I did cover for the channel that I really liked that did get an official US release is the legendary Holy Diver. So yes, I have the reproduction cart, but then I have the physical release that I still haven't opened because I have this. I'd like to get through and try and actually beat the game. When I covered the game, I accidentally kicked my NES, making it impossible to cover, quote unquote, accidentally. I was pretty frustrated because level 4 gets insanely difficult, and then once you get to the boss, it's like, what the hell am I supposed to do here? But it's a fun side-scrolling game. It gets compared to Castlevania a lot. I would agree with that, though it has spells you can use. It has cool abilities where you can freeze magma and do all these other things, find permanent upgrades in the levels. So it's a little bit more involved than just a level-based Castlevania. It's actually more similar to Moon Crystal, which is another game that I just mentioned. But it is super, super fun, but also very, very difficult, and one that I highly recommend. All these games are very, very competent. Maybe outside of Final Fantasy II, I've heard people hate that game. But all these are really, really cool games, and it's a shame that we didn't get them. I think with Holy Diver, it was the religious iconography that kept it from coming out here, because I think the game was done. Which a lot of these, the game wasn't. Like Diver Eon Man was done, and we never got it, which sucks. All right, now here's one that did just get re-released on the Switch Virtual Console. Before that, it was only ever available in the West on the 3DS Virtual Console, which I picked up, but I never played on it. And I've been wanting to play this game for years, and it is The Secret of Murimasa Castle, or Murimasa Castle. Why do I want to play this so much? This is the missing link game between Super Mario Bros. And The Legend of Zelda. So Shigeru Miyamoto made this game between those two. And you can really see the bones of the Zelda series in this game, as far as the isometric, or not isometric, but the top-down perspective is in this. It's still more arcadey and less adventure-y, but this is one that I've been wanting to check out forever. And because I could only play it on the 3DS and I don't have a Famicom disk system, because this is the actual thing, I am just waiting to dive into it now that it is on the Switch Virtual Console. But this one, give it a look. If you have the Switch Virtual Console, check it out. It is a very, very cool game, and I've heard nothing but praise for it. So if you want to see the roots of Shigeru Miyamoto's madness, go ahead and check this out, because I am certain you're in for a good time. And my other Famicom disk system that I have, which is kind of a tongue-in-cheek entry, but I'm saying it anyways, a game that we never got here in the West, was Doi Doi Panic. Alright, you done laughing? Yes, I know. It was rebranded as Super Mario Bros. 2 here in the West, but this was a game that was made in Japan by Nintendo for a specific, like, circus-type event, or a specific troupe of traveling players, because those are the 4 people. And this came out on the Famicom disk system, so the way it worked is you would have to play through the game as all 4 characters, but there was a save feature. So it is very different than what we got on the NES, or as Super Mario Bros. 2. Which, yes, then Super Mario Bros. 2, the actual one, is another game we never got. But just fun to mention it. Just fun to talk about what this game did on the Famicom, even though, because it's not a one-to-one recreation, it did have other things like the ability to save, and having to beat the game essentially 4 times in order to get to the ending, which, luckily... Oh, and they made it so you run faster in Super Mario Bros. 2 as well, so it's a slower-paced game, too. Alright, and here's one, since we're getting closer to Christmas, also speaking of Time Diver Eon Man, was one that haunted me for most of my life, as far as why did we never get this. And it only was a screenshot. And I don't think there was ever anything written about it, but the sad thing is the game was completed. I finally got a copy of it in 2012, and that is Spy vs. Spy 2: The Island Caper. So Spy vs. Spy is a phenomenally fun 2-player game. It's alright by yourself, but it's a very fun 2-player game where you go through different maps that have on a grid, and you're looking for the different pieces of your spy chart to essentially escape before the other spy finds it. And in the midst of doing that, you can booby trap items, you can fight each other, and then you'll die temporarily and then respawn, which is kind of an early version of a deathmatch sort of thing. But it just is so nostalgic, so much fun. I used to play the original Spy vs. Spy all the time, one of my favorites, and part of the reason why I have such good memory recognition for going in maze-like structures in old games, as far as going through dungeons and Secret of Mana or things of that nature, or even in modern games, or stuff like I did in Rhapsody, where it's like, okay, you have 4 different routes, okay, I can map out that way, not it, alright, go back, without needing to write it down. And part of that, I think, is from playing a game like Spy vs. Spy, the original. And 2 was one I always wanted, and it never came out. I asked for it for Christmas probably for 10, 15 years straight. No lying. No lying. I asked for that game all the damn time. And my parents were just aghast. They didn't know what to do. And I didn't know what to do either. It never came out, and you couldn't really look it up back then. So it was just one of those mysteries until I think Jen was the one who found the listing of it from like 2 years prior, and I remember having to reach out to the guy and be like, "Please, can I buy a copy?" Not knowing what I know now, it was just a guy making a reproduction. I thought it was some dude who cracked the code, because that's how little I knew about the scene back in 2012. All right. And here we got another one that actually, this one was re-released, much like some of the other ones, but this was Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light. So this is Fire Emblem 1. Now, what I'm holding here is the re-release that came out a couple of years ago, where they put it on the Switch, but as a download only. So this has like a little glass NES cartridge. But it's cool because it has also a fake Nintendo Power poster in it that makes it look like as if the game had come out in 1990. Here's what it would look like. Now, they've also re-released this on the DS as Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, where they added a few extra chapters to it. But the original Fire Emblem is a fun game. I think it's still available on the Virtual Console or to download on the Switch for, I think it was $5 when it came out. It's by far the weakest as far as feature-wise, because it's the first one. But I have gone through and I've beaten it on Shadow Dragon, and I beat it the first part of Mystery of the Emblem. I've never actually beaten the actual NES one. Maybe I'll get to that someday. I played through a couple of missions when that came out just to see what it was like, and it was enjoyable, but not something that I wanted to dive into again. Now, here's a fun one. So I recently found out that there's a sequel to Kung Fu, which is a great NES game, but the sequel never came out here in the States, and because the game was called Spartan X in Japan, naturally the sequel is called Spartan X2. And this eschews the whole level-based ninja thing. Instead, it's a regular beat-em-up. And unfortunately, it's expensive for a Famicom game. I think the actual cartridge alone is about $70, $80. But it's one of those things that I've been researching games that had sequels that we never got. And I came across a sequel to Kung Fu. And it just looked really, really cool. And it's never been re-released anywhere that I can see. And it's one of my... kind of like, now that I'm getting a little bit more shored up in my collecting, I'm looking for more oddities like this, also so I can have visual aids when I talk about it. So yeah, Spartan X2, let me know if you have any history with it, because I'd love to know more. Alright, and another game that was on the NES that we didn't get, that was the progenitor to Fire Emblem, and also the original Advance Wars, is a game called NES Wars. So this is arguably the original, at least on console, the original strategy tactical game. And it came out made by Intelligent Systems on the NES, just called NES Wars. And it came out and no one really talks about it anymore. Fire Emblem kind of took all that steam, and then later games like Herzog's Y and actual games that kind of brought the strategy genre in there, but it's nice to see NES Wars get its day. I'd love to see it pop up. I think I've seen it mentioned in Smash Brothers a few times, but that's about it. And then the last game we have here that came out for the NES that we never got, that actually they got in Europe, is the legendary Mr. Gimmick. Now, I think they're re-releasing this on the modern consoles. I don't know if it's out yet, but Mr. Gimmick is a fun platformer game that literally would have been a home run. Maybe they thought there was too many mascots. It's made by Hudson, if I remember, or Sunsoft, not Hudson, Sunsoft, and is really, really difficult to do. All these, there's like a secret ending where you can collect all these collectibles one time in the different levels, but it's just a fun platformer, and it hopefully gets its day finally now that it's coming out. That's one of the nice things right in this current day, is that we seem to be getting a lot of games getting a second chance with these re-releases, though I'd love to see them just get re-released on the actual system. Yeah, that's kind of what's nice about stuff like Holy Diver. But yes, Mr. Gimmick, another great game that at least we never got here in the West, and is Europe's Little Samson, from what I've heard. It's very, very expensive there. So yes, there's are a bunch of NES games we never got. Let me know if you've had experience with these. Let me know about some other NES games we didn't got, because there are a ton of them, and especially instances like Contra, where there's little variances, which I don't know about you guys, but I enjoy stuff like that. So yes, and that's all you get for this week. So as a reminder, I release a new video every Tuesday. I do have a Patreon if you'd like to support the channel. You can check the link down there for the Into the AM shirts. Everything you buy using my link supports the channel as well. We are getting closer to me finally being able to afford a PC, so hopefully we can get that, and then I can maybe even stream at that, because we are 300 watch hours away from getting monetization options too. My goodness. Thank you all so much. Like I say, can't do this without you, without your comments, without your likes, without your shares, and I'm just eternally grateful. It's so nice getting to see all you guys every week. It's so nice getting to see the nice new comments. I mean, got some people saying they're seeing some guy about to blow up. That is crazy. I hope you're right, but hey, if it don't matter as long as I have some nice people checking it out. All right. So as always, it's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.